The Viking Age is often romanticized, brave warriors, long ships, and distant conquests. But buried beneath the sagas and myths lies a brutal truth. The Vikings lived and died in a world of merciless violence. This is not a tale of heroism. This is a descent into the darkest corners of Norse history, where death came not only in battle, but through torture, ritual, and revenge. These are the most horrific deaths in Viking history, as recorded by those who witnessed or survived them. The snake pit death of Ragnar Lodbrok. According to the Ragnar saga Lodbrokar and the 12th century Gesta Danorum by Saxo Grammaticus, Ragnar Lodbrok, one of the most feared Viking warriors, was executed in a manner designed to induce maximum suffering and humiliation. He was thrown alive into a pit filled with venomous snakes. This occurred around the year 865 CE, after Ragnar launched a failed attack on Northumbria, a kingdom in what is now northern England. Captured by King Ella of Northumbria, Ragnar was imprisoned and condemned without a formal trial, an act of vengeance for his prior raids along the English coasts. The method of execution was intentionally symbolic and excruciating. Historical sources agree on this brutal detail. Ragnar was stripped of weapons and armor and lowered into a deep pit teeming with live serpents, likely adders or other native venomous snakes. The process was not immediate. Snake venom, particularly in 9th century Britain, would cause paralysis, internal bleeding, and organ failure. Depending on the number and type of bites, Ragnar may have endured hours of agony, his nerves overwhelmed by neurotoxins, his tissues decaying from hemotoxins. He would have died slowly, conscious and in torment, surrounded by hissing death. The Ragnar's saga claims his final words were a defiant reference to Valhalla, how the little piglets would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers. While this line is literary in nature, it reflects a deep Norse belief in vengeance and legacy. Whether mythologized or not, the snake pit execution stands as one of the most horrific deaths associated with Viking history, not only for its cruelty, but for the chain reaction it triggered, the invasion of England by the great heathen army, led by Ragnar's sons, who sought to drown Northumbria in blood for their father's slow, venomous end. The Blood Eagle execution of King Ella. In the brutal saga of Viking vengeance, no death resonates with more terror than that of King Ella of Northumbria. Following the legendary execution of Ragnar Lodbrok in 865 CE, cast into a pit of snakes by Ella himself, Ragnar's sons returned with vengeance, leading the great heathen army across Anglo-Saxon England. By 866 CE, they had captured the vital city of Eoforwich, modern-day York. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, both Ella and rival King Osbert were killed in the fighting. But Norse sources tell a far more gruesome tale, the Ragnar's saga. Lodbrokar, composed in 13th century Iceland but drawing from earlier oral traditions, claims Ella was captured alive by Ragnar's sons. As vengeance for their father's agonizing death, they subjected Ella to one of the most horrific and ritualistic executions recorded in Viking lore, the Blood Eagle. The Blood Eagle was not simply a method of killing, it was a ritual punishment reserved for oath breakers or those guilty of heinous acts against Norse honor. The execution began by restraining the victim face down. The ribs were then cut open from the spine with blades or axes. Each rib was broken outward, creating the appearance of wings. This method is referenced in the Skaldskaparmal and the Orkneyinga saga, which describe the carving of an eagle into Ella's back. Though some historians argue the act may have been metaphorical, others note the ritual reflects the symbolic punishment of betrayers in Viking culture, invoking Odin and the divine right of vengeance. King Ella's death, whether historical fact or saga embellishment, became the ultimate expression of Viking wrath. an execution designed not just to kill, but to desecrate. His fate served as a chilling warning. Those who defied Norse honor would not fall in battle, but be torn open in ritual agony, left to die with their lungs spread like wings under a silent, godless sky. St. Ebba's monastery burned with nuns inside. In the year 870 CE, Viking raids across Anglo-Saxon England reached new heights of savagery. One of the most horrifying acts recorded during this period was the destruction of St. Ebbe's Monastery at Coldingham, located on the Northumbrian coast near present-day Berwickshire, Scotland. The event, preserved in the Liber Eliensis, 12th century, and Chronicon ex Chronicus by Florence of Worcester, recounts an incident that shocked even hardened medieval chroniclers. The monastery, founded in the 7th century by Ebbe the Elder, a Northumbrian abbess and saint, had become a prominent Christian religious center by the 9th century. However, its coastal position made it an easy target for Norse raiders, who saw monasteries as defenseless repositories of silver, manuscripts, and captives. According to the Liber Eliensis, when news of an approaching Viking fleet reached the monastery, the abbess at the time took a drastic and horrifying step. Fearing forced intimacy and enslavement, she convinced the entire community of nuns to disfigure themselves to avoid being taken by the raiders. Each woman reportedly cut off her nose and upper lip, mutilating her face to destroy any appearance of beauty or desirability. But the Vikings were not deterred by the gruesome self-harm. Upon reaching the monastery and seeing what the women had done, the raiders responded with cold brutality. They locked the doors of the church and monastery and set the entire structure ablaze, burning the nuns alive inside. The burning of St. Ebbe's monastery is especially horrific because of its psychological dimensions, the desperation of the victims, the grotesque nature of their self-mutilation, and the calculated cruelty of their murderers. It was not just a raid for treasure, it was the obliteration of a sacred site and the deliberate torment of women who had already destroyed their own faces to avoid a worse fate. The execution of Saint Edmund by Viking raiders. In the winter of 869 CE, one of the most harrowing martyrdoms of the Viking Age unfolded in the kingdom of East Anglia. King Edmund, a Christian monarch ruling the region, was captured by the invading Great Heathen Army, a vast Viking force that had swept through Northumbria and Mercia and now turned its wrath upon East Anglia. His execution, as preserved in early hagiographies and Anglo-Saxon sources, stands as one of the most gruesome and symbolic killings carried out by Norse raiders. The earliest account of Edmund's death comes from Abbo of Fleury's Passio Sancti Edmundi, written in the late 10th century, based on an eyewitness tradition passed to Abbo by St. Dunstan. While hagiographic in tone, the text is consistent with the period's Viking tactics and religious animosity. Abbo recounts that Edmund was offered the chance to renounce his faith and become a tributary king under Viking rule. He refused, declaring that he would not deny Christ nor rule under pagan overlords. The Vikings, believed to have been led by Ivar the Boneless and possibly Ube Ragnarsson, responded with ritualized cruelty. Edmund was bound to a tree and scourged with whips. Then Viking archers began firing arrows into his body, deliberately avoiding vital organs to prolong his agony. According to the Passio, they shot arrows at him as if he were a target until he was covered with their missiles like a hedgehog with spines. Even after this prolonged torture, he was not granted a quick death. The final blow came when the Vikings decapitated him, throwing his severed head into the forest to prevent Christian burial. The execution of St. Edmund was not just a killing, it was a deliberate spectacle. It combined psychological torture, public humiliation, and religious desecration. For the Vikings, it symbolized dominance over Christian kingship. For Anglo-Saxon England, it marked the terrifying price of resistance to the Norse war machine. Edmund's death would turn him into a martyr and national saint, But in life, he was the victim of one of the Viking Age's most horrific executions. The Viking Age was not only an age of warriors, it was an age of terror. From serpent pits to ritual executions, these deaths were not accidents of war, but instruments of power, fear, and domination. These moments reshaped kingdoms, broke kings, and carved warnings into history itself. Which of these deaths do you believe had the most lasting political or cultural impact? And why? Comment below. As the 12th century chronicler Saxo Grammaticus wrote of Viking vengeance, cruelty is remembered longer than valor,